What's up YouTube, Jeremiah Hersey here, and this is the next episode of my Know to Pro series. In the last two episodes, we've been talking about row context, and so we talked about what row context is, and then I showed you how to use navigation functions to activate the relationship that we created in our model. Well, today I want to talk about row context, but how to get out of row context using the calculate function. Now, we're going to talk about the calculate function specifically as it relates to row context in this instance. We'll talk about it more in other videos, but for today I'm going to talk about only calculate as it relates to row context. And so remember that row context means that as Power BI is iterating or looking over a table, it's only looking at one row at a time, and any active relationships are deactivated. And so the calculate function is something that we can use to activate those relationships and perform the same calculations. Now, once again, we're going to be doing this inside of a calculated column. Any opportunity you have to build these columns inside the Power Query Editor, that's where you want to do it. You're going to get better compression and better indexing if you build columns inside the Power Query Editor versus using DAX inside of Power BI. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so here I am inside of my stock item table. And if you remember last time, we created several calculated columns, one of them being the total purchased column. And so in order to bring back the related sale or purchase for this item, we needed to use the navigation function related table, and you can see that right there. So once again, there are two navigation functions, related and related table. Today though, we're going to be talking about a way to activate these relationships using the calculate function. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to create a new calculated column. It's essentially going to be the exact same thing as the total number of items that are purchased, but we're not going to use the navigation function in this case. So let's go ahead and go up here to the top, and we're going to choose to create a new column. And once again, I'm just going to count the rows of the sales table, but I'm going to use the calculate function because it allows us to activate relationships inside of row context. All right, so let me zoom in here so you can see what I'm doing. All right, so we'll call this total purchased calc. All right, so what we're going to do here is we're going to use the calculate function. So the calculate function allows you to modify the filter context, or in this case, the row context, and activate the relationship. And so I'm going to hit tab here to invoke the calculate function. And once again, I'm just hitting shift enter to drop me down to the next line. So shift and enter at the same time will drop you down to the next line. So here it's asking for an expression. So the expression is still going to be counting the rows of the sales table. The expression doesn't change in this case. Notice that there is a filter here. Now, because it's in brackets, this means it is optional. So anytime you see any part of a function that's wrapped in square brackets, this means it is an optional parameter. You do not have to include it in order to make the function work. Okay, so I'm going to use the count rows function. Now, remember last time we weren't able to call out to the sales table. Notice, because we've invoked the calculate function, we can now access the specific table that we want to use. The relationship is now active, and we're going to be able to return the exact same thing that we did with our navigation function. So we'll go ahead and click the check mark here, and we'll run that. And you can see here now that we have the exact same number. Now, once again, the calculate function is activating the relationship between our two tables. So when we're in row context, remember that we cannot use the relationship. So as I'm looking at the stock item table here, okay, when I'm creating a calculated column, this relationship does not exist or isn't available to use unless we use one of two things. And so the first thing that we learned about is a navigation function. And the second thing is now the calculate function. So if we're in row context and we need to activate this relationship, then we have to use one of these two methods. Okay? All right, so let's go back to our data view here and let's do the total profit. I want to show you the same thing here. Okay? So the total profit measure, we created this. And remember that we were using the related table option here to allow us to access that relationship between the tables. And then we found the sum of the profit column from the sales table. Now watch how we create this using the calculate function. It's a little bit easier. So we're going to go ahead and click new column here. And we'll call this profit calc. All right, so once again, we're going to use the calculate function here to activate the relationship because we're in row context. We're creating a calculated column here. And so the expression in this case is we're going to take the sum, and in this case, the sales table, and the profit column. So the square bracket calls out to the column. The single tick marks call out to the table. Once again, reminding you that this square bracket under the filter means this is optional. We do not have to include it. So I'm just going to close up my parenthesis there. And we'll allow this to run. And exactly what we expect to see, the same exact value. Really, you have two options when it comes to activating relationships with inside of row context. So we have our navigation functions, related and related table. And now we have a new method using the calculate function. Once again, the calculate function is going to allow us to activate that relationship and modify the context in which we're looking at. I want to thank you so much for joining me. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more content. I'll see you in the next one.